I am super hyped today. I've got my pour over coffee, I've got my beard, my glasses, my hair slicked back. I've been on Instagram stories, I've got a big shoot today. Let's do this. Although that's not quite my reality. I'm currently in a freezing cold warehouse. We can't put the heating on because we're filming. I've got loads of tidying up to do and there's no one here to help me do it. I've been putting off moving those pumpkins for the last hour. It's not all sexy, glamorous shoots and helicopter rides. This is what it's like being a small town photographer. Okay, let's talk about career paths. So for most of us, we start photography at school. And I say most of us, this is not what I did. So we have school. And in the UK, we're probably leaving there around 21, 22, somewhere around that part. And we will go into some form of apprenticeship or assisting role. And this will be in a capital city. It'll be London, New York, somewhere, I say capital, New York's not a capital, Paris, but a big city, which is a big hub where there's big photographers shooting big campaigns. After we've assisted for a long time, we've lost the will to live, we eventually go it alone, and we stay in London, for example, and we become a photographer. And it's a pretty straightforward thing. Go to school, we assist, big city, photography. But that's not the reality for most of us. Some of us, like myself, come to this later in life. I trained completely differently, and let me show you the path I took. So here's what I did. I went to school. I got asked to leave. I went to a college. I went to university. I went back to university and did a master's. And all of this was in sports science, which is incredibly useful as a photographer. After university, I needed a job. I wanted to be a photographer. This is the point here where I started getting into photography. So I went and got a job. And it was in an office. And I did it for 7 years. Now, at any point in this whole process, I could have gone to London, New York, Paris and set up there, but I decided not to because I've lived around the world. I've lived in big cities, I've lived in Shanghai, Hong Kong, places like that, and it's not for me. I quite enjoy my little surroundings. I like my little world. And I was wondering, how am I going to make my hobby, which I picked up during university of photography, into a profession whilst living in a small city like Leicester? And the best way to discover this, I quit my job. And I became a photographer and I stayed in this small town, city, place. So there's some real positives and negatives about being a photographer in a small town. For me personally, it works really well. I don't think it's more of a challenge or less of a challenge, it's just a different challenge. When you're in a big city, it's really easy to meet people, it's easy to go and talk to the right people, but also you're competing with a lot of people. Whereas once you move yourself out of that area, one, your overheads are generally a lot lower, but also there's less competition. Now for me personally, I have an agent based in London and he's based in the right part of London. And that really helps me with a lot of the work that I do. It's very important for me to have my agent in that location. Agents don't exist outside of big cities, at least not ones that people want to deal with. So having a London-based agent is a massive help and it affords me the opportunity to live outside of London. And for me, that's absolutely what I want. I don't want to move to London. It's not for me. I love going there, I love shooting there, I love going to see my mates there, but I like to come back home after a few days. Now, doing what I do, my general business is that I shoot ad campaigns for people, I shoot packaging, point of sales, websites for big food companies. I think I've only got 1 or 2 clients anywhere near me. The rest of them are based around Europe and the UK. And the reason that I've managed to do that is because I have a very specific niche in food photography. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they are a small town photographer is they try and cover all bases and try and be a jack of all trades and cover the entire economy in the area. This is completely pointless because anybody in your area who needs a specific thing will go and find it, and anyone who just needs a photographer, they don't have big budgets, they don't have a lot of money, they don't really care that much, so they'll just go for the cheapest option, and once the cheapest option is you're probably going to go out of business pretty quickly. Now, it's very scary being in a city and going, I have no clients here, or I've only got one client here, but thanks to the internet, it's really easy to get out there. I mean, I'm pretty sure that hardly anybody who lives in Leicester is watching this video, but I'm also pretty sure that hardly anybody in Leicester is going to book me for my work, because there just isn't that industry here. But when you move out to Manchester, London, there's loads in Milton Keynes for some bizarre reason. There's all these ad agencies who do need my services, and because I have a speciality, they will then hire me, and I'll either travel to them or they'll come to my studio here. Now, some great benefits to being a small town photographer. The rent for my entire warehouse is less than one of my friends pays for a bedroom in a house share in a rather dicey part of London. And this place is huge. Yes, it's not glamorous, but for what I do, we need a kitchen and a warehouse because we make a lot of mess. But it's just so affordable. If I need to go and shoot somewhere else, I can always rent a studio nearer the location, but having this base here at such an affordable price is absolutely brilliant. And then also, there's only one real pro camera store anywhere near me. And because there's not that many photographers here, I have a really good relationship with them. If something goes catastrophically wrong on a shoot, I can have an entire studio's worth of kit thrown into a black cab and ferried over to me at the drop of a hat, which is incredibly useful, and it's why I buy most of my stuff from a local shop rather than online and all the rest of it. Whereas if I was in London, maybe I would have that relationship, maybe I wouldn't, but it's not as easy to have that personal relationship with a small store. Now, the competition's a big thing. I don't have competition in my niche anywhere around where I work, and that is really good for me, because if someone needs somebody in my general area, there's not a great amount of people to pick from. You know, I've got a really good chance of getting that job, whereas if they needed someone in London, I'd be one of 30 people who could do the job. So just having that little thing which goes, well, we don't have many options, here is one of the options, it's much easier to get jobs. You get paid as much shooting outside of London, or New York, although it may be, as you do shooting inside of London. So when I'm shooting here in Leicester in my studio, which is very cheap, I'm still charging the same rate as the London photographers. Because of the whole global sort of way that the world works now with the internet, with YouTube, with Facebook, Instagram, well, Facebook's pretty dead, but you've got this great opportunity to reach out to people. You do not need to be in London to be shooting for London agencies. Yes, it's probably easier to get down there and talk to them, but if you don't have any work on, just go down, get an Airbnb for a few days, set up those meetings, meet the right people, send them your portfolio. Being in a small town or a small city is not some sort of death sentence to your career. You can still make it as a photographer, but you have to go niche. Now, there's some great pros, one of which is that I have 3 really cool supermarkets near me which sell nice produce, and I get this big cheap warehouse. There's some cons to this as well. And I think it's important to say the negatives as well as the positives, because otherwise you won't get the true picture. One of the biggest negatives is I cannot find staff. When I need an assistant, I can't find people with the right skill set, because anyone who's young and ambitious is probably left to a big city. That's a major issue. It's so hard to find hard-working, reliable staff. The next is that you're perceived differently. There's a certain perception of photographers outside of capital cities that they didn't make it and that's why they're not there. And this doesn't go across the board. There's sort of like a mid-level of work where this is really prominent. When you get to the high level of work, no one cares where you live or what you do or what you look like, what you dress like. But in this middle tier, there's a bit of like a stopping ground where you hit there and they're like, oh, you're not from the capital. Well, we want to work with a capital photographer, not someone from a small city. And these things matter at that level. Lower down they don't, higher up they don't, but there's this huge expanse in the middle where it does become a bit of a block. And I struggled through that for a couple of years and it was pretty brutal. One of the major issues is collaborating, and it's so hard to find a good team of people that you can get on with and do some really cool creative shoots. When you're in London, you're in New York, creatives are everywhere. You can find people with interesting ideas, interesting perspectives on the world, and they're just everywhere. Whereas in Leicester, it's either students on the way up who haven't quite formed the full ideas yet, or it's people who didn't make it, and then there's a very small minority of people who are creative, talented, and still here. And it's very hard to find those people, get everyone on board and pull together some creative shoots. It is one of the biggest drawbacks for me personally of being in Leicester or being outside of a capital city. Whenever I've been in big cities, finding 20 creative people is a breeze. Outside of these big cities, It takes some work, it takes some effort, but granted, if you never leave, you'll never know the difference. It'll just seem that that's always the way, but I've seen the other side, and it is far easier to get creative in a capital city. There's a bit of small man syndrome about being in a small town or city. I feel it, and I'm a small man anyway, so I'll probably get double small man syndrome. But there's this thing where you feel that you have to prove yourself, and by saying, oh yes, I live outside of London, but I've got a London agent. I shoot in London a lot. There's all these little things that you try and tell people to make yourself feel more valid, and that's more of a personal thing perhaps than it is for everybody. But I do sometimes feel that I need to justify my fee being outside of London, or justify what I do, because I'm not in London, I'm not in that big city, I'm not where everything seems to be happening. I'm living out here on the peripheries and still working. So the take home here is that being a small town photographer or a small city photographer, it is not something which will stop you progressing with a career. It's not something that's flaunted all over the internet, all over YouTube, but there are so many of us doing this. I know of 3 other photographers, different niches entirely, in my city, who are fully booked all the time, shooting non-stop for major brands. And that's brilliant. And it's great that you can do that. These careers do exist, they're just perhaps not in the format or the way that you're led to believe they are from internet tutorials or websites. So the big take home from this is, if you do want to stay in your smaller city or town, maybe you've got children in schools, maybe you don't have the money to move, whatever it may be, here are some tips. 1, find a niche and just dig down into it. 2, is find a link to a major city, whether it's an ad agency, a photographic agent, a photographic agency, whatever it may be, you need a link to that mainstream so you can go, great, let me take that work out to myself, I can do it, I'm not in London or New York or Paris, but I'm able to do this work and I have that connection there. Building those connections is so important. And the final bit of advice is, try not to judge yourself on what other people are doing. I love watching these videos of YouTubers who are jumping out of helicopters, doing these elaborate shoots with £500,000 of broncolor lighting. But for me, I'm a commercial photographer, I shoot adverts of food. Who on earth is texting me? But that's not my profession. My profession is I shoot high quality food images for commercial use. It's for advertising, it's for packaging, websites. That's what I do. I know what I do, and I stay within my lane. And that for me really works being in a small town.